After a long hiatus, we are back.
It's been a while. But the boys were busy with Mythic rating and rating in general, and we kind of knew this would happen. But
God,
we're
I
back.
kind of forgot my headphones, so you know.
Yeah, it happens. We're back, and we have a lot of things to talk about. We're probably not gonna fit everything within this episode, but on today's menu, we would like to welcome once again Mr. Guiltyas, Pulbik, Mandl, Panthea, and Wordup. And what are we talking about? Tier sets, balancing, probably the new raid, the new affix, and a bunch of other cool stuff.
Depends how passionate we are about one particular topic.
Are we gonna get all of this into one episode?
I guess we'll have to see. Yeah.
Okay. Let's just put a question out there. What would you guys feel is like the most burning topic out of these four that we should start off? I know we mentioned we started with
hot fixes, please.
Hot fixes.
What did you say?
Friday hot fixes for tier sets.
Okay, yeah. So tier sets.
Okay, so it is tier sets, but we're gonna start with the hot fixes for them. That the hot fixes that are coming on Friday.
It's not happening. Don't.
Wait.
It's not
It already happened.
It already happened for Blood DK.
Oh shit.
All right. We're kind of out of the loop with this one. So if Mandl threw it in, let's just see what's up. So Mandl, take the lead, my friend. Talk about the tier set.
You know how you have a public test realm that's supposed to be for testing and figuring out, how the tier is going to be and everything?
Sounds abstract.
And you're supposed to give feedback and all that? So when PTR was up, we gave feedback that the tier set was a bit broken in certain cases. And they fixed that part. But they didn't fix the fact that everywhere else the tier set was shit. So Blood DK rolled out with a tier set that was effectively dead in the water compared to others. Not as bad as Feral, but still pretty bad. Then come this Friday, out of nowhere, 2 lines of bug fixes. The first one, which was basically changing the tier set to make it proc more than before. And another note that says it procced a bit too much, so we reverted some of it. Behind the scenes, that turned a less than a K DPS set bonus that basically did virtually nothing into a dancing rune weapon that lasts for 80% of any encounter anywhere and a 4 to 5k DPS gain from 0 to 4 piece overnight, like that on a Friday. And it upended legendaries, it upended soulbinds, it upended talent choices. We're actually playing Tombstone now.
See, but I think this is why they don't want to do it, right? I think you actually gave the perfect example where I don't think we're going to see them do it again. And I'm sure
if there was much.
I'm sure they probably wrote down these bug fixes like a few months ago, and they just got forgotten about or something, or they didn't get time. They were doing other things, right? Who knows? But now that they've done it, they've kind of screwed you over a little bit. I mean, I guess you got more damage, so it worked out, right? But
it completely shits on every single thing that Hall of Fame guilds were planning, because it was already 1 week into Mythic where people were already planning splits, planning who's going to get the tier and all that, and suddenly Blood DK shoots up from basically needing 0 pieces to it's 4 pieces or nothing, basically.
And it's also, I think the legendary recrafting bit's particularly like the thorn that I pick up the most, right? Like legendaries are expensive, right? Like I know a lot of people that straight up quit this patch or last patch even, because they're like, you know what? It's not worth spending like a 25% of my gold or 50%, whatever it is, or buy a WoW token just to get a legendary item at the highest eye level, right?
People are in for another very nasty surprise on that one, because you can sort of make the tier work sort of optimally with Tombstone and Crimson Rune Weapon, which is a legendary that we already used in Mythic Plus. But the optimal legendary when it comes to DPS is actually something we've never crafted the entire expansion.
Which is cool, right? I mean,
love that.
But
but also love that.
That's a good thing. Yeah, it's making something that has worked.
It doesn't really cost 200. Is it really still 200k gold on your server?
Yes.
On my server, I think everything's down to like 70k at max.
Mine's like 100k, I think, on average.
I was going to say that I think legendaries are way cheaper this patch than they were last patch. I remember playing 300k for my leather fucking legendaries last patch.
There's been a couple of changes for leather. Like the price of leather legendaries is going to shoot up again as heavy hides basically get used up. because everybody was spending their valor just before the end of the tier into basically heavy hides, whereas there's no such thing for plate legendaries.
I want to disagree with something you said at the beginning, which is that it's upended the race to will first people, because I don't actually think it has any effect on them because of the one thing that did happen this tier round, which is an unprecedented level of degenerate splits that I've never seen before in my life, where if they want to get someone a 4-set today, they can probably do it because they'll just buy it from people.
As long as they're not Echo and haven't run out of gold.
Except for that, the sheer logistical operations that were done to get people tier sets as quickly as possible this tier was on a completely other level to any other tier I've ever seen.
Yep. Do bear in mind as well, there's a trading bug at the moment on top of that.
Where you can you can pass it around to people. And as long as it's been in your bags, then you're allowed to trade it.
Yeah. That was an interesting one. That's whack. For anyone who hasn't realized, people worked out a bug whereby, so they changed it so that tier sets, you need to have the tier in order to be able to trade it. But people have worked out in the last couple of days that check isn't for having equipped the tier set, which you have to use the token for. It's just for having had the token in your bags. So you can trade around heroic tradable tokens for everyone in your group, and then going forward, all of those tokens, all of those people who just held the token in their bags for a bit will be able to trade tokens, even if they don't have that tier piece.
This is totally don't do this at home, by the way. Yeah.
Nobody here recommends.
Stay safe, kids. Stay in school. Don't just you take the info. Don't act on it.
I mean, I've never seen anything like this before. When I went into all of the big streams, I'm not gonna name any names, and I saw buying headpieces, tokens we need, big advertise on every stream what tokens they're willing to buy from people. I've never seen this before. Like people were buying BOEs and stuff before, and that changed. But this every stream.
It's the sheer price that they're paying. They're paying tens of millions.
Yeah.
For single tokens.
Tens of millions.
That's how valuable they are.
Wow.
And
they're paying multiple million just for people to enter the raid, not even to trade.
And it even goes further than that this is also the first time, I think, ever that we saw no one enter Mythic at all for a full day. 2 days, because they wanted to go and do splits again with all of the people that they paid and got through to get the tokens as quickly as possible.
Yeah. I mean, there's been so many weird things this tier, actually. Like, the other one being the fact that the jailer basically did not get killed for, 4 days? 5 days?
Well, that's the other thing is that you can say as well.
It didn't even die week 1.
The jailer has just been... Why they didn't put something that was tangible?
Why is there not a universal token?
Exactly.
It's
an easy fix again.
As of right now, there's less than 50 guilds that have done Jailer on Heroic, because there's no reason to. You're better off going into Mythic for the same amount of time.
Well, not only that, it also pollutes your loot pool and your vault. And people have realised that. They want tier, they don't want anything that it gives, so you don't kill it.
But
I think starting next week, people will start to kill it, because it does drop the two-handed mace for warriors /DKs/Ret Paladins, which is apparently extremely strong.
Yeah, but there's another factor on that, which is that it wasn't implemented on Simcraft.
Yes, I agreed, but people prioritize tier over that, which I think was fair. But now that people are starting to saturate on tier, I think we'll start to see more people kill the jailer.
I've got a tinfoil hat about tier.
Hit me, brother.
So in your vault, the way that I speculate it works is you get the items first, and then it rolls to see if it becomes tier, and then it rolls again to see what tier it becomes. Because on week 1, people were getting tiers for bosses they hadn't killed in their raid vaults.
Yes, we knew that. There was in the blue post.
The way that it worked with that
they only confirmed Mythic Plus in the blue post.
No, they said they were doing it for raids as well, because if it didn't work for raids, that would put an uneven skew on Mythic Plus and PvP vault value for getting tier. And then people who did the raid ones who didn't kill those bosses suddenly lost access to certain
they specified it would only not be in for the first week, and then after that it would be even if you don't kill the boss in raid, you can still drop it. We have
then it doesn't
people in
the loot pool to kill jailer then.
Well, it depends how it works. which we still don't know. So if your tinfoil hat is correct, then it wouldn't dilute the loot pool. But people weren't willing to take the risk that it worked off the other way. Because they did also say that it's increased chances.
It could also easily be like a roll for anything, and then there's 5 slightly weighted tier tokens in there as well, and it picks one.
It's kind of worth noting as well that even though it doesn't pollute the loot part, it's like the loot on the jailer is garbage.
It's just a waste of time, right? Like,
basically, apart from the mace, the loot is shit.
And we didn't know about the mace or the trinket or any of that because none of it was testable on PTR. Like back to Mandl's earlier point, right?
The trinket we data mined. Like we already knew the effects, and
we data mined it wrong though, right? Like we actually it was simming wrong up until we saw it on live servers. So like you can only guess so much from what the tooltip says, right?
Yeah. The time factor is the other thing as well. Everyone was really strapped for time last week because they have to do normal, they have to do heroic. There's also a lot of people still doing splits, so you have to do that. You're juggling all of the micro things in a raid to optimize who gets what, and then you also want to do Mythic as well. And then when you go, well, I don't know whether the jailer is easy. Do we want to risk spending an hour, 2 hours on that? Turns out it's not very difficult, but why would we waste that time when we could spend it on something better?
Well, and then you look at the race world first, and you're like, you know what? Maybe I'm just a heroic guild now. I don't know if I want this in my life. Maybe I'll sit this one out. Yeah.
You're not looking forward to your 300 wipes on Halondrus?
No, it'll be like 30, right? Because my guild will be dead by 30th pull, I think.
That fight's gonna fucking destroy some guilds.
It will. I mean, and don't get me wrong. I'm sure plenty of these bosses will get nerfed into the ground in a few weeks, but yeah. I mean, like that. It's very interesting. Like this is the first tier. Like my guild's like, I don't know, world 500 or something, right? So nothing ridiculous by any means. But it's like, yeah, we don't really care about Mythic right now. It's like it's a footnote in what we want to do because tier is just that important. And the jailer is at the bottom of the list. Like maybe I kill the jailer after we kill some Mythic bosses, but I don't know.
That said, jailer does give you 1k rep from the story quest. So it's like
shit.
Hey baby.
3 days of world quest, you get skipped.
Yeah, boy.
You have 50 when you kill him.
That's
you get the mount too, right? On heroic?
Yeah.
We haven't killed him on heroic, we killed him on fucking normal.
I think you get the little Halondrus mount, right? That's from jailer heroic?
Yeah,
that's the best reason. That's the only reason.
How, I'm still curious how they're going to actually nerf a boss that has so high personal responsibility on everybody.
You just remove a bomb sets.
Phase.
Yeah.
You've only got 8 people managing bombs in last phase. You've got more people managing moats.
Bomb set and health, right? Like, I mean, we know that Halondrus does get ridiculous, like much easier with gear, right? Like,
yes,
obviously,
like
you still need to do bombs, right? Like, that's fine. They could also, I think I heard it on one of the broadcasts where they were saying they could rework some of the one shots into not being one shots as well. Like that would be another option.
Well, you can also extend the bomb timer. You reduce the number of bombs. You can have 3 people dealing them instead of 2.
Yep.
There's lots of avenues that they can take with it, and it's obviously going to be the one that come the end of the race because I don't think they dare nerf it now.
Yeah, they've already said they're not going to.
Come the end of the race, I can see that one being immediately hit.
I think it's a really well designed fight. I think the fact that there are so many ways, there are so many ways to nerf it without just cutting health off of it. I think it's a superbly designed fight. Yeah,
I mean the raid's incredible. I'll be honest. Like this is one of the. It's a very interesting raid tier. Like overall, like obviously there's some sore spots with I think gear acquisition and like systems of the patch. But I think if you remove those things and just talk about the raid itself, I think overall it's pretty good.
It's always acquisition and systems, man.
Yeah.
It's there's no calling for nerfs in the sense that the fights are badly designed.
Yeah,
I think it's just that once the race is over and the people who are actually capable of doing some of these fights are over, it's probably in the best interest to do it so that the average people actually get to do them in some facet.
Yeah. I will say they should probably just remove Vigilant Guardian. Like, I don't know why we keep designing bosses like this. Like, if I had to say anything, it would be just delete. Stop making these fights. I don't want them.
Whoa, no, that boss, it gets to exist for one reason alone, and that was the spell reflect bug that people found the first week. Funny. And that existed, that redeemed the entire fight for me.
I think
it's also actually Mythic. It's good on Mythic. I think that fight is actually completely fine on Mythic. Yeah.
Yeah.
It changes from a fight that I like dreaded being on. I was trying to get a warlock to play online rock paper scissors with me to like an actually pretty cool fight, which is good because like HFC was just Hellfire Assault was just awful.
Oh yeah, it's definitely better than that. I don't know. It's not exciting to me. I guess personally.
Yeah.
It fixes the biggest problem of the heroic version. Is that there is always something to hit or do.
Yes.
And when fights have that stop and start thing, that's when they get boring. But at least Mythic, you know, boss is always there. There's always at least some mechanics going on. So it's okay. Yeah. For an opening boss, I've seen worse.
Yep, Hellfire Assault had exactly the same problem, where outside of Mythic, you basically just sat there, twiddled your thumbs, and waited for the next wave, basically.
Just melee sitting there going, we're bossy.
Yeah, basically.
I think the only strong criticism I have for the raid is that the number of people who are using Inky Black potions to actually see things,
yes,
because of the color overlaps in a lot of places, is quite excessive.
Dude, from an accessibility perspective, this raid is so fucking trash. Like, it goes almost as high up as Crucible for that.
And we know they can do like, and it just feels like a bit of polish was missing, right? Because I think like prototype Pantheon, the spears, for example, like during the winds phase, like those were impossible to see on week 1. But they fixed it.
They were
like
so bad.
They made it in like much better after we gave feedback. So like we know that they're capable, but like there was I think a bit of polish missed here on like how easy it is to see some of these mechanics against the colors of the room.
Well, the best example that they did is what they fixed to Anduin. The way that they changed those pools that the ghouls drop when they die.
Oh,
they're bright. They're completely unmissable now. Whereas before, you could barely see the pools on the ground.
I didn't even know they were there, actually. Like, I was, like, when we were first doing it, I was like, oh.
Whoops. You just died to it, and you're like, what the hell?
I'm a Shadow Priest. You can't kill me. Have you seen Vamp Embrace healing? It's insane.
I've seen some large numbers of Vamp Embrace healing, particularly in that phase when you're...
intermission Anduin, it gets nuts, But
regarding Inky Black potions, I'm kind of curious from, like, I haven't actually gone in and properly tested all this shit, so... would colorblind mode, because like I remember particularly Crucible where people turned on colorblind mode because it turned some of the void zones that were on the floor into green as opposed to purple. Did anybody check that?
I have not tested any of them. I'd be surprised because a lot of it is like light colors, which is typically not what like colorblind modes target. They're usually more like primary colored stuff.
Yeah, the most offensive examples of it is everything in the sand area. So Artificer, Halondra, Skolex. Those are quite bad for it.
Skolex is pretty good because it's purple on the sand. But
Skolex is not an Inky Black fight. You cannot see any of those pools when you have it on from experience. I don't know how I got hit as a tank, but
I mean, but it would be nice if they like just polished it a bit more while we were doing raid testing, or like also just make an Inky Black potion toy or something. I don't know. Like it's
yeah, man. Put a 2-hour cooldown on it for a 10-minute duration that expires on death.
No.
I'd be slightly more critical and say that I feel like I'm not going to blame the QA testers, but I feel like someone should have noticed that kind of thing. Like if you only have to go there once to start seeing, you know, this laser is the same color as this circle on the ground as this moat, and they're all really hard to distinguish which is which. Maybe we should, you know, make it glow, make it a different color.
The way QA testing on this kind of stuff works is if they use the same color, they test by contrast, or they don't test at all. If they go on different colors, then they actually test for color blindness. Which is why, as they added more accessibility checks like that, the encounter designers went more and more for same color on same color, but slightly different contrast. Because that way it allows them to basically cheat and pass the test.
It's the kind of thing that you don't need like player data of like a lot of people playing it in order to work out that this is like bad.
Yeah, it should only take one person raising it as a red flag for it to be like, it's not a difficult change as Anduin showed. All you do is you make them more solid, because I think the other problem is as well, a lot of them are very transparent effects on the ground.
And I think it also takes, like, I think it's worth having a dedicated team for this, right? Like, I think most modern corporations that have websites, like, have a whole team just for accessibility. Like, I think Blizz encounter designers should have the same thing, right? Like, you should have a person on your team whose sole job is to, like, look at an encounter from, like, an accessibility perspective and be like, okay, we're adding this mechanic, is it telegraphed correctly in a fair way, right?
Yeah, they have one. It's a new team, and it's cross-functional in that it affects all the different games. So, like, the person to follow on that one is somebody on Twitter called Gazel, who basically...
Hopefully this gets better then.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like, it's getting better patch by patch, but it's... The problem with accessibility and things like that is it takes time.
Well, it's probably that they've only come in and this raid was already, like, on the way to being shipped. So the ship has sailed and you have to fix it in post, which is entirely fair. As long as it's something that they realize needs to be improved. And it probably will be now because it got a lot of attention with the number of people using Inky Black on Halondra specifically was one.
On the Race for First broadcast, yeah.
Yeah, well, once they start mentioning it and bringing it up as a point of discussion, that's like bad press. So you probably want
when I was watching Halondra's day 1, day 2, I was like, wait, does Halondra have like a secret night phase or something? Like, what's happening?
It's hard mode. Well,
in terms of because you guys mentioned initially, I wanted to circle back on the tier set as well, because I was curious, like from an outsider perspective that hasn't played with tier sets in so long, and I bet like a lot of people haven't played with tier sets. You guys said that this was, I think Wordup mentioned that this has never been done before, the way and the amount of the splits and the focus on tier where you actually, well, I guess you would ignore Jailer in any type of expansion if it didn't drop anything significant. But why do you guys think people want tier so bad? Obviously, it's a power increase, so that's self-explanatory. Yeah. But why more? Why now more than, let's say, I don't know, Antorus or
no? There's two big factors.
Colossal power increase for certain specs. It's like it's much more of a have not than tier has ever been before by orders of magnitude.
Yeah, but back in Antorus and everything, we had Master Loot as well. So we didn't need to split like crazy.
There's two factors. One is personal loot only, and the other is tier sets 300% stronger than the strongest tier sets have ever been in the past, and that's maybe underselling it.
Yeah, in the past you could make splits with people in your own guild, and you could force generally the tokens in the right place. Whereas now you can't. The game decides for you. So the only way to force it is by having significantly more people and a higher pool to start funneling it to the right people. So it becomes a more logistical problem than an organization one.
Well, just to put some numbers onto this, if you guys didn't, so I pulled my spreadsheets from Legion. My tier set in Legion was a 6% damage increase on single target.
Yep.
And now this tier set is 15% single target for me. And my tier set isn't even that good. So there's just so much power attached to a tier set now. And I think part of it's with all we don't just have tier sets now, because in Legion all we had was, we had tier sets and we had our 1-2 legendaries, right? But all of that borrowed power only added up to maybe 20% of your character's power, 15%, 20%. We're at 45%, I think, player power coming from borrowed systems now, borrowed power systems. So it's
I still have the one for both of the sets from Tomb and Antorus there.
Yep.
And the absolute peak tippy toppy super strong bonus was 11%.
Whereas now it's 40.
It's 40. Yeah. If you don't have it, then you don't play the game. You're just out of it. Whereas then you also have I think at a certain point the discourse around it got really muddied because people were saying that the average in the past was 15 when it absolutely was never that. It was 5 to 8.
The difference between doing keys as obviously I'm not playing a whole lot of Feral because tier sucks and the spec sucks at the moment. So I've been doing a lot of keys as Guardian, and the difference between doing keys last week without 4-piece and doing keys this week with 4-piece is just completely obscene. Same. It's I'm playing an entirely different game this week compared to last week.
And that's and I think you've seen that reflected in the content, right? Week 1 Mythic Plus felt like shit. Week 1
was hard.
The raid fights, the race roll first is still going on. It will probably still be going on next week because people are still missing their borrowed power, right? We don't have double Legos yet. So it definitely feels like they've been struggling to how do you balance content when it comes out when they know everyone's going to gain 30% more damage in 2 weeks, right?
Didn't we talk about this like a month or so ago?
We did.
Whenever they released
I think we predict this. Like, okay, you're gonna see when I put 2 Ghosts live, you're gonna see how bad it would feel. And Pulbik just mentioned the first week of Mythic Plus, which was
it was awful. I hated it. I hated the game.
Painfully.
I depleted everything.
Also, it's not just me. Oh dear lord!
3 abominations on stage. You're like, excuse me.
I was depleting everything.
I mean, even in the new dungeon side, like the new dungeons have been getting nerfed into the ground like every week, but like even the old dungeons felt crap. So
Necrotic.
It's worth noting that for the guilds that don't have that pool of followers that they can basically use and abuse, there's another pretty perverse factor where they end up being forced into LFR as well.
Oh yeah, we did that.
When I look at it though,
we didn't pay LFR.
When you look at the comparative bonuses, I'd say that in Legion specifically, your set bonuses in total was worth about 1 legendary on the average. Now, double legendary is not going to even remotely come close to how much the set bonuses give for certain specific classes.
It's like double the value for me.
Not even close. Like, there are some where it is even. Like, for me, double legendary is about the same as getting 4-piece. But then for some, how is a double legendary, like the extra one, ever going to remotely compete with like this bonus that completely warps how strong your spec is?
Hey, would you like to become a Blood Death Knight where the Necro Legendary went from valueless to the best thing you can get?
There's just too many multipliers in the game, right? Like it's too difficult. You can't. It's so hard to balance to make an exciting tier set that changes how you play in a meaningful way, and have it also not be bonkers OP or just dog shit. Like getting that middle ground is difficult, I'd say, especially in a game with all these different levers and stuff on a class.
Oh, I think it's a job that's too hard to actually pull off. I think they painted themselves into that corner.
Well, I mean, when you have Soulbind's conduits, we talked about this, right? There's just so much affecting someone's character, and like Mandl is saying, right? Like they made a few bug fixes to the tier set, and suddenly 6 other things dominoed changed off of that. Like you now want a different legendary, different conduit, maybe covenants, like all this stuff, right? And there's just so many combinations in the game. It's hard to predict and find. Like Enhancement Shaman got a bunch of changes coming into this patch, right? And now they have a great tier set, right? Like they probably just didn't know. Like how do you test this stuff in advance, right?
Well, I think it's reflected in the guides a lot. When you looked at the guides in the past, you could actually like pretty succinctly get a page together that'll be like, these are the talents you use, these are the legendaries you want, this is your set, this is how you play. Done. Now you have people who have to sift through 6 or 7 pages because you have to have context as why do I play this Soulbind? Why do I play these conduits? Why do I pick these legendaries? When do I do this? And it becomes like a daisy chain all the way through every single piece of information that you need to get. Whereas before, you could just do it in one.
I mean, I don't know. There's been a Reddit post about my Icy Veins guide, like every single, like for the last couple of tiers that I've been writing it. So I don't know. I feel like it's still, that's always a problem, but.
On the Soulbind front, like I'll give you another good Blood Decay example. The set at the moment, when you have the 4-piece, gives you 1.5 seconds of the extension on Dancing Iron Weapon every time you hard strike, irrespective of how much haste you have. So evidently the point is to get as much haste as possible, because that way you basically get more global cooldowns for the value of your global cooldown. And suddenly Dreamweaver is basically the thing you want to play, even with Potender.
For my situation, when I looked at it, when I looked in every single other tier, there was 2 covenants that you could choose, and you could write about that. Now, the legitimate situation is that all 4 of them are playable, so you need to tell them why they'd play it, when they'd play it, which soulbinds to play on each of them, because in those cases 2 or 3 of them are all good as well, and then you need to assign the conduits to it, because that all changes too depending on what you're playing. And then there's 3 different legendaries that you could pick, so you also need to go into that, and you need to like have a flow chart of when you do this and go all the way down to actually reach what a full build is. And I think that's really overwhelming for a normal person.
See, I'm going on the exact opposite, where
I think it's amazing personally. I love it personally, but I think the average player might be getting to the point where, this is a bit too much for me.
Yeah, it's choice paralysis, basically. That is a thing, by the way. Like, when you tell people, well, they're all good and they're slightly better in certain scenarios, people will not choose.
True.
On the other hand, if one thing is extremely good and everything else is garbage, well, the other choices don't exist, basically.
It's also been made even more complicated, this tier specifically, because there's now 3 states that characters exist in.
Yeah.
Where, you have your 1 week wonder, that's without sets, without legendaries. Then you've got with the tier set, but only 1 legendary. Or what about if they didn't get a tier set and then they have double legendaries but no tier set? And then what about if they have tier set and double legendaries? And a lot of the cases, which spec is good when changes quite a lot, or what they're good at.
There's also another state, which 4 set you have, because that changes what legendaries you can use.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, and the problem we talked about of like certain legendaries are only in tier slots, right? So like a lot of people gearing up right now, like Shadow has this problem. A few specs have this, right? Where like
I too.
You really want to run Shadowflame Prism, it's only on Helm and Gloves. Well, guess what? Helm and Gloves are on the first half of the raid, right?
Yeah.
You're probably going to get them first, and then you're going to be like, wait a second, do I run 2-piece or my best legendary? Do I run 4-piece or my best legendary? And it's like, well, unfortunately, you pick tier.
Yeah, it gets even worse when you get a case like Blood DK, where the 4-piece is way more important than your second legendary. So you basically don't craft in a tier slot.
Yeah.
But then later on, you're going to go, hold on, I have my 4-piece now, so I can craft in a tier slot. Another 200k down the drain.
Yeah, it's very
I'm fairly confident that what's happening to some guilds right now, I mean, I know it's been brought up where I play, but I know it comes up a lot in Discords too, is people have just decided, well, until we get double legendaries, we aren't going to clear the raid, so why do we really bother going too hard these 2 weeks? Why don't we just do our normal raids, focus on splits a bit, kill a few bosses here or there, and then when we get those, then we can start taking it seriously, because we know that everything's going to change then.
Yep.
Because the way that comps are built now, what's strong today changes a lot on Wednesday. Or Tuesday for America.
Especially with people finishing off their 4 sets.
Yeah, well,
there's a lot that changes on Wednesday.
That's going to be the status for a couple of weeks until everybody kind of gets in line. But I was just wondering, we talked so many times about this problem they build themselves with all of the externals. Do you honestly think they are aware?
Yes.
I mean,
but
I would hope so.
Yeah, but they're in a problem at the moment, a really problematic state where they started the expansion with many systems and they can't obsolete them. They're all flagship systems. Yeah. You can't just go, well, your soulbinds are suddenly gone.
Of course.
You can't explain that. Same thing with Covenant choices. So they've done the right thing. They've allowed people to swap freely. And take the example of the campaign in Zeref Mortis, which gives you 13 renown just like that. It's great for people wanting to try another Covenant, because that's just enough to unlock all the soulbinds.
It's time investment. They've invested the resources to create these systems, so they have to last for the whole time. It's very rare that something gets obsoleted mid-expansion. The only example recently that I can think of is Domination Shards. But otherwise, if you've built it and you've invested the time to make that part of the expansion, it has to last the whole expansion. And because they put all of it in front-loaded to try and not do what they did in BFA and Legion, that would have been okay if that's where they stopped. But to be rude, they couldn't help themselves and they had to keep adding more in.
No. I feel that was always the case. But I was asking more in the context of, okay, they're aware, I'm guessing, from all the feedback, probably, they watch videos too and read forum posts and, I don't know, join Discords, all of that. Are they aware enough to okay, looking at maybe 10.0, are we expecting more of the same shit? Honest to God, not speculating, just honest expectations on what is to come.
I highly doubt it's going to be this excessive. I think it's going to happen. I think it's going to be back to the trickle feeding, maybe one, maybe one a patch, maybe 2 over the course of the expansion, something like that. Not now where it's 7.
Yeah, it's worth noting as well, though, that the expansion, the systems, most of them were actually pretty decent. It's just that they were mired in crap from acquisition and forced lock-in.
I highly doubt it's going to be this excessive. I think it's going to be back to the trickle feeding, maybe 1 a patch, maybe 2 over the course of the expansion, something like that. Not now where it's 7.
Yeah, it's worth noting as well, though, that the expansion, the systems, most of them were actually pretty decent. It's just that they were mired in crap from acquisition and forced lock-in. Like Covenants on
think
their own,
they all had some
as it
pretty
is
big flaws.
right now, is actually pretty healthy, at least in my opinion. You can do whatever you want, and you can bring whatever you need for a fight.
Yeah, like I
I
get
like
it, but
quite a lot of them.
yeah,
Like in isolation, one of the big things that they did run into though is that once the system's done and shipped, each patch that was the only one that they focused on, and then the next patch that's done, we're not going back there, we can't refix that, we can't retune that, it's over, we've tuned the soulbinds now, and that's how they're staying. And then next patch, well, we haven't got time to do that because we need to tune domination shards, and next patch, we need to tune tier sets now, so we can't go back and do those. So where they are is where they are, to deal with it.
Yep. Did anybody say Covenant Legendaries on that one? One of them is still DPS loss, by the way.
Nice. Necrolord Covenant is still awful.
I mean, yeah, sure. The systems, if you look at them, like breathe through them, they sound fine, but then you always get to the same problem over and over every time. And the latest example you just gave it, Mandl, with hotfix and tier sets on Fridays. And Pulbik did have a good point. They did say that they wanted Shadowlands to have less systems. And it turned out...
they lied to us.
To fix a system, you need another system.
Yeah, exactly. Doesn't it feel that way, that you have to put in a new system?
If they'd have stuck to their guns with what they said at the beginning, which was, we're putting all the systems in at the beginning, and that's it.
Yes.
Which is what they initially said. If they stuck to that...
no. They also said they were going to do tier sets, right?
But I think all of the interim ones... we've got double legendaries, that counts as an extra system now. Shards count as an extra system.
Yeah.
Like, I think that between all of that, if they actually stuck to their guns and only did what they put in at the beginning, it would have probably been fine.
Yep. It's worth noting as well that the whole systems to cover other systems, that has actually happened with a couple of Covenant legendaries. I mean, look at Necrolord Druid, for instance.
Yeah. It exists solely to solve a problem with it, as opposed to just fixing the problem with it and giving them a real legendary. So now they're forced to take that legendary. They're just worse than real Covenants.
Yeah, I still don't understand why they force us to lock another item slot, because character sheet item slots are actually pretty valuable because each one of them is a choice you can't make on gear. So I still don't understand why they didn't just baseline all the Covenant legendaries.
Some of them are really strong, and some of them are also more defining than the ability itself.
Yep. Yeah,
I honestly think they did it to nerf the raid, though. I don't think they did it to give us more power. It actually feels like they did it to try and nerf the raid over time.
But then
I suspect
they want to do it later.
They realized that so few of the Covenant legendaries were actually being crafted across all of the Covenants for certain classes. Because the actual pickup rate on Covenant legendaries was quite slim. Yeah. Certain classes got good ones and they made it, but most of the time no one made them. So you've put all this effort into, well, I say effort,
tinfoil hat.
but you put this effort, quote unquote, into making them, and no one's playing them, so we can just force them on you, right?
Yeah, but that's kind of true. Like the ones that were being crafted is basically Panthea Rogue, the Kyrian Warrior, I think.
Kyrian Rogue,
Warrior. Kyrian Rogue, and there was
Kyrian Paladin,
Balance Druid,
Nightfade Druid, and Ventfade Druid.
There was a bit.
That's just a few out of 36.
But the thing is that there's a lot of them that were just dead, never crafted, ever.
I mean, yeah, but the same thing is true for half the other legendaries in the game, right? Like every spec has 8 powers. How many of you have even looked at half of them?
I've actually used all of mine. Over the course of the expansion.
Wow. Look at you.
All 4 have worked. But the thing is that if you do it for the Covenants, you introduce it into the pool for 3 specs and 4 Covenants all at once if you do it, which is enabling 12 new options, which is return on investment pretty high.
But I think it's circling back to the question, though. I think none of this is instilling confidence in me that they're learning from their mistakes, right? So I don't necessarily believe that 10.0 will get better. I mean, I would love to be proven wrong, but it doesn't feel like they quite understand the value, I think, of base changes versus ad hoc system changes or borrowed power changes. And I think there's a time and place for both. And it doesn't quite feel like they've struck the good balance of that we've maybe had in the past, right?
Well, the crucial thing is they get painted into the corner of not being able to make base changes because of all of the external power things. Because if you make a base change, how does that affect X legendary, Y talent, Z system?
Yep.
So they get locked into only being able to alter and tinker with the systems. Because that happened for enhancement is like a prime example of they made base changes and then everything warped around it. Like every single choice that you made, we had like legendaries that we'd never used before suddenly usable, talents that we'd never played, soulbinds that we'd never used, all of these and covenants that we never used, all of that came back.
Yeah, there's something else that I'm a bit more worried about than external systems, which is the whole how do they call it? Those items with iconic effects that they keep designing more and more of. Yes, cantrips. That's the one. Where, like, in my opinion, in moderation, they're good. But we're at the point where they're so hit and miss in power that, like, you could go one tier to the next and not have to ever swap a weapon.
I somehow know where this is going. There you go.
Yeah, it's like the big problem is going to be, like, if this wasn't the last tier, the Jailer Mace would be a huge problem. Jaethys is currently a problem, and the Rogue Dagger is currently a problem.
Rogue Dagger is not going to have to so insane to me.
Old trinkets as well, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Like,
I mean, it's their gearings. It's all gear, right? Like their stance and their systems around gear are confusing and not consistent, and just kind of a mess. And it leads to all of these problems, I think.
I mean, I'm just going to straight up go back to what it is, and like we're back to vanilla when it comes to that.
I'm not opposed to trinkets. Pieces. I'm not opposed to trinkets being carried forward in moderation. Like Font of Power, that was fine. Carry that forward because it's something that's specifically powerful for mages. Like Rune of Reorigination.
I think carried forward is different than it being BIS, though. I think that's where I would disagree.
Where I'd like them to be, if they're like that, is that they're uniquely powerful for a certain thing that you want to do.
Yes.
So, like Ink Pods and Razor Coral brought forward to Nyalotha, that was fine because it was very specifically one thing that it wanted to do. Same for Font. Same for, well, not the same for Roro, because Roro basically made Feral in Siege, but yeah.
But the issue I have with that, though, is then you go into this new tier, and now there are just dead items on the loot table. Like, that doesn't feel good either, right? Because you're like, well, I already have my trinket, so if I get a trinket drop in the raid, that's like, we were doing normal this week with my guild, and we got 2 Grim Eclipse trinkets, and I was like, yep, disenchant them, get rid of them, they suck. Like that, you know what I mean? Like, I see what you're saying, like the flavor of carrying that forward is okay, but I think it has negative effects on the next raid's loot that is detrimental, I think.
And then plus as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
Again, plus trinkets is the same shit.
Yeah, I mean, Changeling has been eclipsing for what, 3 tiers now?
I mean, Changeling, everyone wants dungeon trinkets, right? Like, pretty much 1 or 2 of them, I think, right now is everyone's best. That or old raid trinkets, I guess. And it's just I don't know.
If I were to be quite mean about it, I think their biggest flaw is that they have consistently put like the big, wacky, wild trinkets and weapons in the middle tier. And then the end tier has actually been really conservative recently. And
what do you mean?
Well, if you look at, say, like Siege versus Throne had 2 trinkets, one of which was nerfed leading into Siege. And then Siege had the wild trinkets, like super valuable. You wanted them really badly. Whereas when you looked at going from EP to Nyalotha, EP had the wacky trinkets, and then Nyalotha had the very tame trinkets that you didn't really want. So they were never going to reach the power level of those. And it's happened now as well with like the cantrip effects in Sanctum. It's not happened really with trinkets because trinkets have just been kind of whatever from raids, but like those are in the middle, so you drag them forward, and then there's nothing at the end to really juice you wanting to change.
Yeah, that's something they did pretty well in Legion, though, as well. Like going from Tomb of Sargeras into Antorus, like the trinkets in Antorus were also absolutely wild, and it compounded even more in the fact that you only had 1 trinket slot.
Yeah, I think when they do that, when they do this and they put something crazy in the middle one being carried forward because it's uniquely good is fine, so long as the one that like the end tier That's where they let loose and they just make crazy trinkets. They just do whatever. That's why Siege was so like the Siege trinkets are so consistently popular. It's because they were absolutely leaps and bounds ahead of anything before it.
Is this the first expansion they've had this many? And for those that don't know, these items we're talking about are like the Sylvanas Rogue Daggers, the like Hunter back piece or Hunter bow from Sylvanas, like those like off like weird effect items. There's what we're talking about. Is this the first expansion where they've used those this heavily?
Yes, absolutely.
Yes.
Like by an order of factor of 10 easily.
They experimented with them in Crucible to middling degrees, and then didn't really do them much elsewhere.
Crucible had a very heavy emphasis on Kiss Curse as well.
There was a few of them in EP. I think there was like 4, but none of them were particularly crazy. Sans the staff, I suppose the staff was pretty cool.
Yeah,
and I think it just makes gearing awkward. I mean, we've talked about this before, right? And like, I do write SimC stuff, but like, I dislike not understanding what's better without having to use SimC, right? Like, and these gear effects are like the perfect example of that. Like, you just like straight up don't know like if this effect is better than its stats on the item, like the Anduin rings or any of the weapons they've added. Like, without getting them, like you just don't know how good they are. And I think I don't like that as a system. I think.
Don't even get me started on the Anduin ring, because that one, at least for Death Knight, has been a roller coaster kind of thing. Where
it's so fucked, man. Mine's worse.
The initial version was like, it was a good concept where you traded some secondaries for an amplification on part of your kit. Like, really good idea, like conscious trade-off that you can make. Whereas now, it's basically out of the item budget, so the effect is free. So you're just going to wear it.
I don't want to let this like slip though that they were badly designed things like the bow and I think the bow is a really cool idea.
Yeah,
and I think the daggers. The daggers are better than legendaries by design. But the actual like mechanic on it, the idea behind it is really cool. Like, and it's also fairly intuitive. Like, I see it; it's going to make my finisher stronger. I play sub. I do a lot of finishers, therefore I want the daggers a lot. Right? Yeah. You can read it, and it's a actual class mechanic.
I think we're saying they're cool effects if you do them in moderation, and if it's in the last tier, right? I think that's kind of what we're saying.
Or if you provide a way to get them. I mean, I'm thinking the daggers from Cataclysm, like the rogue daggers, the ones that you could upgrade over time. The daggers from Sylvanas would have fitted perfectly into a quest line like that.
Yeah, I think that's fair enough. Like, just don't attach it so hard because it's fucking miserable. If you reroll Rogue now, you have to go back and you have to do Mythic Sylvanas.
if it's this good, make it a reward, a tangible fixed reward.
Yeah, or again, just put it, just do it in the last tier and like save the last tier for those things. Like if the last tier's items were just better, like some of these problems just kind of go away, but like they haven't been. I remember was it WoD? We had all the class trinkets. Like, I don't know, that was fun.
Yeah.
I mean,
class trinkets were sick.
The class trinkets were extremely good, and they were really clever because a lot of them were testing what they were going to do going into Legion. There were a lot of examples of those trinkets being something that they were thinking, we're going to be reworking the classes, and this is something that we want to try, but let's put it on a trinket, and if they like it, we roll that into the class.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's just like the way, and they were very exciting effects, right? But I think the ones they've added lately, like the caster dagger in the new raid, right? Like, it's just a stat proc.
It's just generic. It's not interesting.
It's a stat proc that's generic, and the worst part about that, I hate this dagger so much. As a shadow priest, there's only one-handed weapon in the raid, and it's that dagger. So like, if that effect was bad, then the two offhands in the raid I'd probably never use because I would just get a staff, right? But it's also at a higher item level, so it's like it has to be. I don't know. It's a mess. Like I want to take the effects, like the class trinkets, or like tier set. Like you really want to get these effects because they're fun to get. They change how your character works, and they're exciting. They're good gains. But when they're just kind of boring stat effects, I feel just as meh about them as I do about conduits and soulbinds, right?
I mean, we harped on the Shards of Domination about this, yeah?
Yeah,
like
exactly.
Over and over and over. Like, if it's a system like that is just, an item that is just designed to give you random, like, slowly stacking stats, Why not just average it? Like, what is the value of having that proc? Unless it's gigantic at the end, which in the case of the dagger, it isn't.
And how do you balance that? Like, right? I actually don't know the answer to this. Like, how do you balance rogues right now when the raiding population that raided last year is just significantly better than someone that starts a rogue right now?
I mean, that way you don't have the problem of Castle Nathria. At least people will go back to Sanctum of Domination.
Did you want the brutal answer? You can't.
Yeah, you can't, right?
There's no hemming or hawing about it. You just simply can't.
People aren't going to go back and do Sanctum Mythic for...
They haven't got the time. Yeah, like, they're busy playing the new raid, right? They're not going to go, okay, well, let's carve out 19 people's time to go back and re-clear Sanctum to get you your daggers, maybe.
Yeah.
Or what if they don't even know that, right? Like, what if they're just a viewer that's watching the Race to World first and like, man, these rogues, like, you know, on Liquid's team, they had a rogue that was doing, like, topping the meter a lot on Holandris, doesn't even have Forset. They're like, oh, rogues are just awesome. I'm going to do that. And they're like, wait a second. Why am I just not that good? You know? And like, sure, they're learning the spec. Maybe that's obviously part of it. But like, oh yeah, you're just missing a significant chunk here, which is like 10% of your damage, I think, is these daggers?
Yeah, it's 10 at least.
That's insane. That's more than that's twice as good as the Feral Forset.
Yep. It's worth noting as well that there's more than one of these items. Like the rogue daggers are the most brutal ones of them, but for tanks specifically, there's a cheat death now.
Yeah.
And it's even worse because you don't have to do Sylvanas for it. You have to go back and do Fate Scribe.
If you're going to do a cheat death, if you're going to do a cheat death in any tier, like you just have to do cheat deaths every tier. I'm sorry,
they did. The first two tiers had it.
Yeah. Because it's just too good for it's too good for M+ and progression.
Yep. I mean, the first
tier wasn't a cheat death. It was a fucked up thing. And then they changed it. This is
another thing that was really, really weird. They hotfixed it on 9.2.
Oh, they did change the trinket,
Yeah, they completely changed the trinket. Before that, it was an Ankh. Now it's a cheat death.
I wouldn't be opposed, hear me out, to if they put these things in that are really strong in the middle tier, putting them somehow into the Mythic Plus loot table for the next tier.
Agreed. Yep.
As a way for you to continue getting it.
Or buy it with Valor.
Or that. Or like an upgrade token that you can get maybe, because I love tokens. Just some way to carry it forward. If it's going to be that strong, it's obviously something you put effort into. So you might as well
anything that changes the M+ loot pool, realistically.
And it also fits the problem of making people go back. I mean, the daggers are a really, really good example of it's now even harder to get them because you don't get that vault anymore.
Yep.
Yeah.
So you actually have to hard stack a group of rogues to go and get Mythic Sylvanas daggers. So they're even rarer than they were before.
Hey man, I mained the sub-rogue all last season. I haven't got one dagger. I think I've been more than 300 Sylvanas, normal LFRs, heroic. We didn't get to Mythic one. Never got a fucking dagger. Oh, I think one dropped from LFR. But you know, it's
regarding trinkets and cheat deaths. Like there are, on the other hand, there are still so many tank trinkets that you'll never use. Like they buffed Stoneheart, they made it even worse than before.
Oh no!
Why not just turn one of these into a cheat death and then problem sorted?
Yeah, tank trinkets. I feel like this tier have been, like this tier in particular, are like the worst they've ever been.
Yep,
from the new raid.
Like Protoforge is just RNG casino.
Yeah. I think the loot spec thing is interesting though, right? Because it's like, how terrible is it to go onto a boss and be like, yeah, you just shouldn't be tank loot spec here?
Yeah, I mean, it's the same for a load of DPS, right? Like
healers,
DPS. Our DPS struggling with like loot specs to work out what loot specs dodge trinkets because they just don't want any trinkets from the raid.
Like
Dragalon, because trinkets are the coolest shit.
Yeah.
On the note of refarming old stuff, Legion had a pretty good solution for it, where there was the gambling vendor.
Yeah.
Where you buy it and it would be a random trinket or a random helm.
Oh yeah,
you
in Argus,
old items.
Yep. I mean,
and you still had the mission table, right? Didn't those give?
You still had the mission table, which you could send out every week.
Hey, we have the currency to actually bring back the vendor right now because I don't know about you guys, but I'm still on like 45k of Cosmic Flux with nothing to do with it.
That'd be awesome actually. So you a vendor that takes Cosmic Flux to roll random trinkets from the entire expansion.
I don't know. We're about to also get another system that they could very easily slot it into. which is the whole creation catalyst that should definitely have come online earlier. But
creation catalysts, vault tokens, the socket thing you get now,
and you could just juice the dagger up to a higher item level with flux.
Yep.
Yeah, I think it would be this is a band-aid, right? Because we're basically saying balancing items is hard, right?
Yeah.
Especially it's hard because you have to do it for every spec in the game that could use that item. It's hard. It's not easy. It's not trivial, right? And so what we're saying is a good way to fix that is to be like, well, just make the acquisition of that item easy, right?
Yeah.
Because then it's kind of like essences in BFA. It didn't matter if one of the essences was broken because everyone had access to it. It was fine.
There's only two paths you can go down when you put an item in that's as strong as that dagger, really, I think. And that's one, you let it be carried forward, or two, you nerf it at the end of the tier. It was a failed experiment. It was too strong. We nerf it. Done. That's over. But if you keep it in at the same strength, you have to make it be able to, the ease of acquisition and be carried forward, really.
Yep. I mean, we had some of this in Legion with the vendor. We had Bloodthirsty Instinct for anybody playing agility melee DPS, and that trinket was bonkers. And
you know what? I was fun fact about that trinket. It was never simming correctly. I don't know if you guys knew about this, but it had an execute thing in tune, but then it never actually worked. I was looking at to implement the Anduin rings, and I was like, oh, this is kind of how Bloodthirsty Instinct should have worked. I'm gonna go look at the code, and it turns out we just commented it out because no one knew we couldn't figure it out.
No, it's even better than that. It didn't function in game.
Oh, it just didn't work. There you go.
This was poor kits because we did this in the Feral TC. We went through. We had 20 hours of dummy logs of people just auto attacking it to work out proc rates, but it turned out it just didn't proc more at low health.
Oh, okay. So that makes more sense.
So it's the same as the priest ring.
yeah. The priest ring I think is worse because if you guys didn't know, it's supposed to go from a really low proc rate. So at the start of the fight, it doesn't have much uptime, and then in execute, you get full uptime. Well, it's broken right now, and you just get full uptime the entire fight. But the fun fact, it doesn't work for healing priests. So it does not proc on heals whatsoever. So
excuse me, what?
Does it still go down?
Yeah. My priest got it in raid yesterday or Wednesday, and it's still not working on heals. So I was like,
incredible.
Just keep up Shadow Word Pain on the boss as a holy priest, right? And you'll get full uptime. But without that, it won't proc at all.
Funnily, on the topic of trinkets from Emerald Nightmare, the trinket from Il'gynoth was incredibly broken for only enhancement at spontaneous appendages.
Oh yeah.
One that no one wanted at all unless you played enhancement, because the tentacles that came out also proc Stormbringer for completely unknown reasons, which is a really big proc. They realized that was really strong. We can't have that trinket going forward. So they just removed that interaction, and therefore you don't need to go back and get it. If that had stayed in, that trinket would have been your best trinket from Emerald Nightmare all the way through to end of Antaurus. No questions.
And they had the world boss trinket that everyone wanted, the Arcano Crystal from Withered Gem. I will never forget that world boss. Right? No, I'm sure if anyone played Legion, they won't forget it. But yeah, the vendor kind of solved that problem in a way. And I don't know. I thought it was fine.
And it's a pretty clean way as well, because you get resources by doing random stuff, and then you can gamble it. It's it doesn't cost anything basically. And you're going to have the one person who wants to gamble a Giga Titanforged Arcano Crystal with Leech and a socket on it. But
I think you should probably say, they can't add sockets, they can't add tertiaries.
There's easy solutions to prevent people from basically harming themselves.
I think the creation catalyst might end up being the best solution for them, because you're going to end up juicing specific items, right? Yep. But because it's not in yet, and it should really have been in, honestly, probably a week ago, if I'm being really honest.
I can see them delaying it until the race world first, but I think as soon as the race is over, I think it should be available.
Because 8 weeks is a really long time for a catch-up mechanic.
And that's kind of what made this whole podcast really, really interesting. We're kind of probably trying to wrap it up a little bit. This all happened during the race to world first, and it feels so wonky, and we still don't have everything yet. So I don't know when people are watching or hearing or listening to this, but this is currently recorded on the 18th of March. Jesus.
March.
And I've every time I tune into the race world first, maybe I'm just unlucky, but for the like 80% of the time I just saw heroic. I was like, okay, I'm doing heroic too. But
weird. It's a weird race.
It's what I thought.
Quick reminder as well, it's Friday. It's almost work time in NA. What kind of hotfixes will we get today?
I don't think we're getting hot.
I'm rooting for Feral. I want that Feral buff.
I'm pretty confident that they're not changing anything to classes until race is over.
How
I don't
about
think they can. Like, how do you do it?
I mean, the blood thing is, I would call it an anomaly. Otherwise, they can't do it because they're already locked in, like, silly things. Classes are basically stuck until race is over. I think that most of the bosses that are already dead, they're not getting touched. Unless they're, like, fairly trivial ones. And the ones that are going to get changed are the ones that are basically so untested that they need to be changed because they can't be killed. And even then, I'm not entirely sold on them wanting to change anything until next week when they actually see what kind of damage they do with double legendaries.
Dude, you ready for the assassination rogue fun?
I mean, it's a hard job, right? But I think, like, if they did any aura buffs or nerfs right now, like, it would be kind of disingenuous, I think, to the class respect, because you don't know, like, sims are only going to do so much for you, right? Like, stack sims are always kind of a meme, right? Because, like, you're fighting a patchwork boss. So guess what? Patchwork's not in this raid, if you didn't know, right? So, like, there is no metric that we have, you know, externally. Like, maybe Blizzard has something internally. I don't know how good it is, but, like, they kind of need to wait for a good chunk of the player base to get double legendary, get 4-piece, start killing bosses, right? To have a good idea of, like, who's actually underperforming and not. The issue is with this tier lasting, the Race to World First lasting so much longer than usual, I think the player base is going to have to wait a lot longer than usual for some of those things to happen, right? Because I think they're rightfully they want to keep competitive integrity intact with the race, and they don't want to say, like, oh yeah, Feral Druid 20% aura buff, right? And then the guild that happened to have a Feral Druid is like, oh shit, now we can play, right? Especially with all the splits they're doing. But
it's just really risky to do any tuning now because everyone's going to bump on Wednesday.
And bump by different amounts.
Exactly.
So, like, some people, the double legendary is like 5%. Other people, it's like 15%.
You can't nerf anything because what happens if you nerf them, but they gain less from double legendary? Now they've been, like, double nerfed. And then you can't buff anyone because what happens if they gain loads from double legendary? Now they got double buffed and now they're suddenly insane. So you have to wait. So it's a problem that they've created by their own design, but it's forced them into having to wait for that.
I think all of this circles back to what Pulbik mentioned, that there's too many multipliers, which again circles back to all of the external power systems. You guys mentioned that, they wanted to front load all of it at the beginning, but then again, was that really even necessary? Why do we need... Because even at the beginning, we had legendaries, we had covenants, we had conduits as well. To start off, just at the beginning, was maybe one of the most complex expansions for any new player to get into. And you cannot really fix any of these ideas now with their mentality without adding more stuff where, you know, they could have had, let's say, the Covenant Legendary just be, you know, an upgrade to your Covenant ability by, I don't know, reaching 80 renown. They could have done something like that, but all of these had to be like parallel systems they had to farm for. So I think what we're seeing right now, I believe it's maybe the best example of what can happen with all of these being added again and again and again and again. And maybe they can see this and maybe they can acknowledge or maybe that there's a different problem underlying all of it. And we might not see it in 10.0. That could be maybe a thing to look forward to.
They've done some things have happened that have been good, right? Like, they did decide no more new renown, no new soulbind traits. Like, they did kind of say, like, hey guys, we acknowledge that this has somewhat gotten out of hand, and they're like, we're only going to add what we promised in the past, right? Which, like,
can you imagine if there were actually any new things?
It'd be fucking insane if they added new renown levels.
I think that they're going to not... The only strong thing that would make me think they're not going to do it in the same way as Shadowlands is how much more difficult I imagine it is when they go through this to actually retune things. Because when they look at classes, they go like, well, Class A, all of their power is weighted into conduits. They're getting like 20% from a conduit. Well, Class B, they only get 2% from conduits, but they get 20% from their ability, whereas the other one only gets 5%. And then this one, it gets nothing from either, but it gets like 30% from its legendary. So how do we tune any of those? Because they're all interlocking systems. And what happens about the one that gets like 15 from all of them? They're suddenly like the big winner because it's all these multipliers. So they might just go, well, this is maybe a little bit too far because we can't pick where the power comes from.
There's an important thing to think about when it comes to 10.0 on all these lessons, though, is that 10.0 is probably already in a state where it's almost ready for playtesting. So all these lessons likely arrived after the initial design phase.
I feel like they got a lot of these lessons are like coming from expansion, right? Like the fact that Covenants being like the entire class mean that it's hard to tune and stuff like that. I feel like that's stuff they should have learned from like whatever the patch we're in 9.0.
Yeah, I agree with that. But by that point, the new expansion was probably already being designed. And a system that is as big as Covenants is very hard to rip out of an expansion if you've made the wrong choice, basically.
I feel like they did a pretty good job in 9.1.5.
I think that it came out as early as it did, because it did come out a good patch and a half earlier than expected.
Yes.
Might lean you toward thinking that when they were doing 10.0 and whatever they had in there, they thought, oh, this isn't very popular, actually. And it's not doing what we thought it was going to do. So maybe we should not do it again.
Dude, imagine this race to world first if you had the forced Covenant locks where everybody needs to be Panthea for the sausage.
Night Fae,
I mean, Night Fae, I think, is actually low-key better. Night Fae felt better playing it myself.
Actually true, because you can flicker the first ring and then flicker afterwards. Yeah.
But I mean, I think 10.0 will be an interesting time to see what lessons they've learned, and like, because it could be a really good opportunity to be like, hey guys, we've heard your borrowed power complaints, we've heard the system complaints. We're not going to add any new systems except for tier sets this entire expansion. Instead, we're going to put all that time into base class design, and we're going to make sure everyone's talent trees have good meaningful choices, right? Maybe put some like Shadow Priest has a couple fun legendaries I'd love to see come back as talents. Maybe some Covenant abilities for some specs come back as talents, like, or even baseline to specs, right? Like, they should, in my opinion, that's where they should spend their time, and they could easily do that. We don't know.
I think it's super easy right now for them to fix the talent trees. Like we with the enhancement on, we've got a document together of like what the tree is like now versus like what we could pull forward to just immediately make the tree perfect. And you can just go down the list of every class and go, well, this is a stinker talent, but this is a good legendary. We replace the talent with the legendary. This is a good Covenant ability, and this is a stinker talent. We're just going to replace those. Bam, like problem solved. They've got all of the testing of it working in practice. Just pull them forward and get rid of all of the trash that's on so many tiers of like talent rows.
And you got all these free work out there. Like, if they just come out and say, like, hey guys, we want to invest in classes. We want to hear your feedback on what you think your class is missing or what you like changed. You got so much free labor out there with myself and others on this call that are like, oh yeah, we got plenty of ideas or feedback.
Yeah.
You've also even got data, though, for a lot of these effects from this expansion. Like, you can just look at the data with the legendaries to see what it does in practice, like, and whether people liked it. And if they did, that sounds like a keeper.
Data can be misleading, though. I mean, look at Blood DK, where we played Super Strain because it was the best effect, but it was boring as shit.
I mean, there's a lot of examples on that, and think about this dead talents.
There are examples of ones that were there was no choice, so you just picked the best one. Yeah. But there are also a lot of examples of actual really interesting choices that people actively made. And the ones that have got the highest variance are probably the ones that you want to look at as to, wow, there's probably a reason that people were swapping so much between these.
So, like, I mean, I think that's what we're saying is that I hope hopefully in the next couple podcasts we'll have an announcement for 10.0 and then we can start.
Yeah, it's April 19th, right?
Yeah, that's right. That's right.
That's like in a month from now, for sure. All right,
so
cool.
We'll see what we see then.
You know, like just to wrap it up now, it kind of felt that we haven't done a podcast with the boys in over, I think, a month now, because I think we talked the less. Everybody was just pouring in because there's so much stuff to get into.
It was good, man. It was good. I
really
mean,
cool.
I vote depending on your guys' schedule and what the Friday hotfixes will or won't be.
Friday seems like a good day to
put a pin and maybe get another recording next week and see exactly what's happening, because this period of the patch seems to be super hyper with everything that's happening.
Well, the thing is, we will have a lot to talk about at the very least, because next week we're gonna have double Legos for all the people. So that's gonna make things even more interesting. Right now we kind of like know like in perspective, but we'll see what
that's gonna be interesting.
Yeah, with the rest of us first and the numbers, it's
Holy fucking shit.
What happened? What happened? There's a lot in the chat.
I'm doing killers, definitely something.
That
just happened.
Liquid just killed Anduin with their 2 tanks
from
to get from like 5%.
Only with the tanks? Was that reading correctly?
Only with the tanks.
Oh man, I wish I would have
like 1%.
Hey Ian,
just went for it.
Beautiful. So we caught it like while recording the episode. This is gonna be broadcasted on Monday, but hey, it's history in the making. All right. Well, we'll just take this time to like thank once again Mr. Guiltyas, Mr. Pulbik, Mandl, Wordup, and Panthea for joining in and laying down their thoughts. Hopefully, seeing everybody in the same formula next week with double Legos and more kills on Race to World first. And,
we'll see exactly if anybody actually kills any version of Jailer by next week.
Yeah. Kindly reminder, do check out the description of the video if you're watching this on YouTube. If not, go on YouTube and check the links in the description. You know, for all the boys here, there's Twitters, there's guides, there's streams and all of that. Really, really cool stuff. And thank you everybody
thank you very much for coming today, listening, and hope you enjoyed it, and we'll catch you next time.
And bye!
I've been loving it then, I still love it now. Still, I play WoW. Still, I play WoW. Getting better every day, let me show you how. Cause still, I play WoW. Still, I play WoW. It's getting harder to stay, but at the end of the day, it's a guilty pleasure, so just log in and play. Whether it's classic or retail, I'ma do a /bow. Still, I play WoW.